Hello and welcome. I am Light and this is my channel. Tonight I'm going to tell you the story of a disappearance and of being found. It's the story of Mitchell Dale Stehling, who went missing in Mesa Verde National Park. Before we get started, if you would please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps my channel. Share it with people who are interested in this type of content. And please subscribe. When I get to 3,000 subscribers, I'm doing a giveaway and you won't want to miss it. So go ahead and click that bell so you'll be notified when my content goes live. Alright, let me tell you about Mitchell Dale Stehling. On June 9th, 2013, in Mesa Verde National Park, Colorado, Mitchell Dale Stehling was with his wife, Deneen, and his parents. He told everyone that he was going to go for a quick hike to the Spruce Treehouse ruin, and he left about 4:30 p.m. That trail is pretty easy, and especially considering that it is only a little bit less than a quarter of a mile long. Then it connects to the Petroglyph Point Trail, which is a 2.5-mile loop with cliff exposure that takes off from the Spruce Tree Trail. Witnesses saw him on the trail and they spoke to him. Then he failed to return to his family. 7 years later, on September 17th, 2020, his remains were finally discovered by a hiker. The Stehlings left their hometown of Goliad in Texas, and they were in a camper trailer. Then they drove west because Dale had always wanted to see Colorado. He was an outdoorsman. He was a great camper. He was a man who could spend endless hours tending to his garden, and he knew exactly how he was going to spend some downtime. He wanted to go on a day trip to Mesa Verde National Park. Originally, the Stehlings had only planned to drive out to the lookout point and then take in the scene from a distance, considering that many of the trails were rugged, and Deneen was overweight, and Dale's parents were elderly. It just didn't seem possible for them to easily hike it. But, being the rugged outdoorsman that Dale was, he decided to get a little closer. At 4:08 p.m., it was hot. The temperatures ran from 90 to 100 degrees in the park, and the terrain consisted of steep canyons and mesa tops at an elevation between 6,500 and 8,000 feet. The hike to the top of the trail should have taken just about an hour. So let's talk about Mesa Verde National Park. Mesa Verde, which is Spanish for Green Table National Park, is an American national park in the National Park System. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site located in the Montezuma County, Colorado. The park protects some of the best preserved ancestral Puebloan archaeological sites in the United States. Mesa Verde was the first national park of its kind, and it was established in 1906 by President Theodore Roosevelt to protect the legacy of the Puebloans who lived in the area for 700 years. The park occupies 52,485 acres near the Four Corners region of the American Southwest, which includes Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona. With more than 5,000 sites, including 600 cliff dwellings, it is the largest archaeological preserve in the United States. The park is best known for structures such as Cliff Palace, thought to be the largest cliff dwelling in North America. Starting around 7500 BC, Mesa Verde was seasonably inhabited by a group of nomadic Paleo-Indians known as the Foothill Mountains Complex. Later, archaic people established semi-permanent rock shelters in and around the mesa. By 1000 BC, the basket maker culture emerged from the local archaic population, and by 750 AD, the ancestral Puebloans had developed from the basket maker culture. By the end of the 12th century, they began to construct the massive cliff dwellings for which the park is best known. By 1285, following a period of social and environmental instability driven by a series of severe and prolonged droughts, they abandoned the area and moved south to locations in Arizona and New Mexico, including Rio Cama, Parajito Plateau, and Santa Fe. As a side note, also where I lived, in Casa Grande, Arizona. On that day that Dale disappeared, his family quickly reported him missing. At first, rangers thought that he had gotten off track, and they told his wife to give him a couple more hours. The park never had a person go missing for more than a couple of hours, said Betty Leorance, who was the park public information officer. When he had not returned 2 hours later, after the start of his spruce tree house hike, an intensive 2-week search began that at its peak included 60 searchers, 2 dog teams, helicopter surveillance, a rope team that rappelled off cliffs in the Chapin Mesa area. The K-9 team initially showed interest in that area in the first days of the search. The Petroglyph Point Trail follows a cliff base before ascending to the mesa via a series of steep, switchbacking sections which steps cut into the rock. But keep this in mind. On the day he disappeared, it was, as I've told you, extraordinarily hot. Now, for people who live in that area, live in hot areas, we get used to the heat, but not so used to it that you're going to go hiking without water, which is what he did. He didn't take any water with him. He was not intending to be gone very long. He was going to go on a quick, less than a quarter of a mile jaunt, come right back. He did have a cell phone, though, but no one was able to call him, and there was no pings from it after his disappearance, except his phone records did show that on the night he disappeared, he tried to access his voicemail at about 7 p.m. When he disappeared, he was wearing a khaki Mesa Verde Museum Association baseball cap, a brown t-shirt, tan khaki shorts, calf-height white socks, and Red Wing Oxford walking boots. He also carried his wallet and some cigarettes. According to Patrick O'Driscoll of the National Park Service's Media Services, other than the main trails, the majority of the Mesa Verde is uncharted territory that is off limits to hikers. At the time, Jesse Farias, who was chief ranger for the Mesa Verde National Park, said that the area had been heavily searched, but there were no results. In November, they had a dog team come back in and search that area again for human remains, but they did not pick up any hints. He said that when we have search and rescue exercises, we go there and we continue to look for him, but we have not found him. The authorities claimed that there was no foul play suspected. They're quoted as saying, "My gut feeling is that he's out there somewhere and he never left the park. There's no reason to think otherwise. There have been no sightings. The case is still open, and there's been not one physical clue found, and he's presumed to have died in the wilderness." However, the park never did close the case on Stehling, and it continued to look for him in a limited, continued mode, meaning that if a ranger was in the park, he or she would keep in mind that there was an unfound body in the park and be aware of any evidence that could lead to the recovery. At the time, Chief Ranger Farias said that a photo of Dale Stehling and notes about his disappearance remained on his wall. On average, about 5 to 10 people go missing in the park yearly, according to Farias, but Dale Stehling stuck with him. Farias said that the park did extend efforts for months to find him, which included calling in close to 100 people at a time to search, scale cliffs, and searching in areas of the park that are closed to visitors. There are a lot of cliff areas in the park that extend down to the Ute Mountains Reservation that is filled with rocks, and Farias said that if Stehling had fallen down a cliff, it would be almost impossible to see him from above or below. If he fell off a cliff, if he fell between the rock area, unless you're looking straight down, even helicopters wouldn't have been able to see him. Authorities said that they shared case files with the family and they kept them informed of their search activity, but Deneen doesn't think that the rangers did enough to search for her husband. In total, rangers spent 2 days searching for Stehling before scaling back, she said. In a news conference, she cited a lack of evidence as to the reason. 1 year after he went missing, she said, "Now that it's been a year, and the more I reflect on it, honestly, I'm just pissed off. Their attitude was, he was there, He was lost, and what are we supposed to do about it? But Farius counters this view from Deneen, saying that the rangers at the park searched for Stehling for about 3 months, mostly in scaled-back mode, which, as we've been told, means that if they were there, they would keep an eye out, and continue to keep his disappearance on their radar. Their searches, he said, were about 3 to 5 mile radiuses around the trail that he was last seen on. However, Mrs. Stehling wanted the search to extend out of the small area, as despite her husband's age, he could put more miles in a day than they thought. But they wouldn't do it. Over the course of 2014, Deneen returned to the park 3 times, expecting answers, expecting to find her husband, expecting some sort of closure, but each time she returned, nothing had changed. She believes that her husband went off the trail because of confusing signs in the park. Because she was unable to walk the trail, she fed her interest by the account of a family who'd last seen her husband on the trail. There just so happens to be an account of a writer and a hiker, Jody Peterson, written in 2013, who was in the park the same day and on the Petroglyph Point Trail. And in her article, she writes, "After an hour of walking, I suddenly heard a weary male voice call, 'I need some help.' I thought of the missing hiker. Perhaps after visiting the spruce treehouse, he'd attempted this trail and ran into trouble. I called out several times, but I got no response. I thought about going off trail to look, but I figured I'd become victim number 2 if I tried to scramble down the ledges of the cliffs. My cell phone had no signal. I hiked back down the trail as fast as I could, and when I found the chief ranger, I told him what I'd heard. Relief washed over his face as another staffer said, 'We thought we heard a call for help in that area yesterday.' They quickly began planning to bring in dogs and more searchers. I left the ranger station and stood looking at the opposite side of the canyon where I'd heard the call, and I said a silent prayer. When I got back to my western Colorado home the following day, I checked the news, thinking I'd read that the hiker had been found. Instead, I learned that Mitchell Dale Stehling was still missing, and now 70 people were looking for him. As I write this, it's been almost 2 weeks since Stehling vanished, and the search has been scaled down. A group of us think he's still somewhere in the park," said Chief Ranger Jesse Farius. "We've all heard of planned disappearances, but this didn't smell that way. The odds of him being found alive are basically 0, though. Perhaps he fell between big rocks in a place where searchers can't see him. Perhaps winds shifted and made the dogs miss his scent. Dying alone in the wild sounds like a free and romantic way to exit this earth, and many of my outdoor friends say they'd prefer to perish outside, like Lawrence Oates," I've told them in agreement, remembering the member of Scott's ill-fated 1911 polar expedition who walked out into a blizzard to die. "On some freezing cold night, I'll say what he did. I'm just going outside, and maybe sometime." My friend Albert imagines another sort of ending. "My last moment will be at 12,000 feet in a thunderstorm. There will be a big flash, and all that is left is my flask and my hiking boots. And my friend Joe has already picked out a sleeping bag to be buried in." But is that really how any of us wants to die? Alone in the wilderness, unattended except by beetles and vultures? Better, I think, to be with those you love. Perhaps altitude sickness and dehydration did take their toll, and he missed the trail and he fell over one of the many cliffs. Interesting that the name Stehling is of German origin, and many, many of the more unexplained disappearances are either German or having a German origin name. After 7 years without a trace being found, park law enforcement rangers, with the assistance of ISB and Montezuma County Coroner's Office, found Dale's remains at the National Park on September 17th, 2020. Mesa Verde National Park Superintendent Cliff Spencer said that an anonymous tip the day before indicated that the remains of Dale Stehling were in a remote section of the park west of Durango. The tip did not provide an exact location, but descriptions in the tip gave search crews a good idea of where he was. Spencer said that the body was found quite a distance away from where Stehling was last seen. In fact, over 4 miles. The area, which took search crews about 2 hours to reach, was searched in 2013 when Stehling went missing. Found with Dale were his driver's license, his credit cards, a social security card, and some of his other information. A forensic anthropologist examined the remains to look for any signs of trauma or any clues that could explain the strange circumstances surrounding Dale's death. The police said that as of late September, foul play was not suspected, and it did not appear that he had been attacked by an animal. They found that because Dale's remains were just bones, it was almost impossible to determine a cause of death unless he had obvious signs of trauma, which he did not. It looked like natural causes. Well, the man had been calling out for help, which doesn't seem like a natural cause. And he was over 4 miles away from his intended destination. The anonymous phone call about Dale's body had been made by a hiker who was in that area. The area was closed off to the public, which might be why he wanted to be anonymous. Or perhaps he knew more information than he was ready to give. Even after a 7-year wait, there still remains questions about the circumstances of Dale's disappearance and death. The remains were found in an area that had been previously searched, which, for those of you who are interested in these types of cases, know that that is oftentimes the case. The search was extensive over 2 weeks, which included 60 searchers, 2 dog teams, helicopter surveillance, rope teams. The Mesa Verde Park is relatively small, though rugged and hot. Was Dale just somehow missed? Or did he enter the area where his remains were found after it had been searched? How could Dale get so badly lost on the Spruce Tree House hike? Remember this, it was 1/4 of a mile long. How did he end up over 4 miles from where he was last seen when he had no supplies, no water with him, no food? And lastly, what did cause Dale's death? We will probably never conclusively know a part of this story. Thank you to those who have come. Again, please give this video a thumbs up if you are interested in this type of content. Also, please subscribe. It really helps my channel. Good night.